Okay, so this is statics. Today I'm going to go through the syllabus, go through the class structure, how it's graded, and then I'm going to give like a little introduction to where this fits into the rest of mechanics classes, and then I would guess it'll take about an hour, maybe a little over an hour, probably not a full 120 today. And then I have an assignment for you to start to work on. And yeah, that's it. So the first thing, well, first let me talk about the setup that I'm going to use. So instead of lecturing on the whiteboard, I'm going to lecture on a tablet. So, you know, as I talk, I'll write up here. And the benefit of doing that, so you can take notes just like if it's on a whiteboard, but the benefit is I'm taking a video as I go, and that'll be posted on YouTube. So if you miss classes or, you know, or if you just want to see something over again that didn't make sense in class or whatever, those videos are always available. And by the way, all the videos from previous semesters are up too if you want to see any like old stuff. And then also the PDFs I'll put on D2L. So it's just a nice way to like have a record of everything that I talk about and everything. If I say anything inappropriate and then like afterwards I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, I might edit that out of the video. That's the only thing. Everything else will be on there. Son of a bitch! Oh, shoot, I'll edit that out later. Okay, so today I'm going to go through the syllabus mostly. I assume most of you are used to D2L and stuff, but you need to use D2L. You probably want to check it once a day or something. That's the only place I'm going to post materials and stuff that you need. So to get to D2L, go to the Normandale webpage, and then there's a link to D2L. And you need a star ID and password. So let me know if you have trouble getting in to D2L. But once you're in there, you should have a list of all the classes you're taking. This is statics, so we'll go to that one. And then when you get into the statics D2L page, the first thing you'll see are announcements here. And whenever I give you a new assignment to do or make changes to problems or anything that I have posted, I'll put an announcement in there so you know to look for it or print out the new problems or whatever you need to do. I'm not gonna put an announcement in every time I change the grades. So, but to look at your grades as we go, just go to assessments, grades, and it'll all be updated to the most recent stuff that I've graded. And then all the materials that you need are in content. You missed I made a super funny joke about swearing in class. It had everyone broken up. Maybe I'll send you the exclusive video to it. I'm going to cut it out of the main video, but maybe I'll send it to you later. Let's see. Okay, so what we have are lecture notes from the last time I taught this, last spring. And, you know, so what that looks like is, it's just the PDF of whatever I wrote on the tablet that day. So if you ever miss class, you can just print out the PDF of the class and that can be your notes for the day. I'll talk about that more pretty soon. So if you want to read ahead or anything, if you're ever, you ever have time and you're just curious about what kind of topics are coming up, you can go to the old lecture notes and page ahead. Things are always a little different semester to semester, but it's basically the same, the same topics and stuff. And then I have the assignments and the solutions. So the assignments are all of the problems that that you'll be working on this semester. In statics, I think they're in pretty good shape. So I don't think I'm planning to make changes to these, but little by little I'll be looking them over, and regularly I'm just sort of changing things. I think maybe the solutions are a little outdated, so if I have time to improve those a little bit, I might. But so if you go to one of these, it's just all the problems related to that topic. And so I like to think of the class as really more than, if you think of this as like maybe, I'm not sure how many, but say 150 total problems or something. I like to think of all of my classes as kind of being about understanding the approach to these 150 problems, and that's what I want you to come out of here with a good understanding of. So this is really kind of what the class is about, what the tests are going to be based on. The solutions, I think there are solutions to about half of the problems. But, it's just my handwritten solutions to half of the problems in each one of those sets. And then the only thing left is course information. That's where the syllabus is, and there are a few other things that are important. Calculations for centroids of two-dimensional objects. That'll be important later on. And reaction loads for joints in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And so, I'll let you know when we get to that stuff. There are also some programs for a TI-89 calculator. You're going to need a graphing calculator of some kind that's going to do vector calculations for you. You don't normally want to do vector and matrix calculations by hand. It's not the worst thing in the world with just vector stuff, but this is a lot easier. It tells you how to use your calculator to do the dot product, cross product. If you have a calculator that does eigenvalues and eigenvectors, how to do those. We won't need that in statics. It gives you the code for a program that does rotation matrices. We'll talk about rotation matrices a little bit, but that's not going to be a big part of this class. It's a much, much bigger part of deform for the people who are taking deform too. But it's just nice stuff to have at your fingertips. That's the last one, yeah. This is just the code for a TI-89. So if you happen to have an 89, you can just, punch this in exactly letter for letter, and it'll work. If you have an 83 or an 84 or an 86 TI calculator, it's pretty minor changes that you have to make those work. If you have a TI Inspire, it's sort of bigger changes, but in any of those cases, let me know and I can help you get those entered into your calculator and make sure you're figuring out how to use them. I think the best time to do this would be office hours. So if you could just come to office hours sometime, bring your calculator in, and we can figure out how to do it. I had someone come in one time. They're like, I just got this used calculator. Can you help me get all these programs entered? And I opened it up, and all the programs were in there, and they bought it at Pan America or something, and like one of my old students had sold it. And first I was like, that's cool, and then I was like mad, like I wanted to know who the student was who sold it. Okay, and finally, the main thing, oh no, one more thing before the syllabus. The vector review, this is what the assignment for today is going to be based on. So it's just kind of like a little, book chapter or whatever about the kind of vector calculations we're going to do, refresher about what what it means to have vector components, and so there's all that in there. And then there's 23 or something problems. I'll probably give you about the first half assigned today, and then the next half assigned next time. But I think this is nice because I know all of you have used vectors before in physics, but not everybody, in a lot of classes, people think about vectors just component by component, and really it ends up being more like scalar calculations. The way I'm going to talk about this in all three of my mechanics classes, which are statics, deform, and dynamics, is more like you're thinking about everything as a vector. It's not just about like individual components one at a time. And so I think this sort of puts you on the right track for thinking about vectors the way that'll make sense for this class. Okay, now finally the syllabus. Okay, statics, this is a 3-credit class, and that actually has important information in it because it tells you what the expected workload is for this class. 3 credits means we're spending 3 hours a week in class, and the expected workload universally for a 3-credit class or for any college class is 2 to 3 hours outside of class for every hour in class. Okay, so that means you're coming to class 3 hours a week, and then you should expect to be working on this stuff outside of class 6 to 9 hours a week. And since there's 7 days, let's just say about 7 hours a week, So like you're coming to class, and outside of that, you're working on this an hour a day. And the more you spread it out, the more evenly you do it, the happier you'll be, I think, with your understanding of stuff as the semester goes on. So I don't think that's not like a crushing workload or anything, but I know people have different work expectations and stuff, and but you should just know, like, if you look at your calendar and you can't consistently find 3 plus 7, so like 10 hours or whatever a week total that you're going to devote to this class, then I would not recommend taking this class. Maybe it would work, but most often when people do that, they just end up getting in a hole and throwing money away and hurting your grade point average, and those are both bad things to do. So if you think there's going to be a time commitment problem, maybe we should talk about it. I really think if you just consistently come to class and then put in your hour a day of work, and you're making a good faith effort to do the problems that I assign and to understand what I'm trying to say in lectures, I think it'll be a good experience. It won't be a horribly stressful class or anything like that. Okay, and I think you'll leave this class feeling very ready for the next stuff that's coming. My name's Gaio Lakin. Please call me Gaio. I'm most comfortable with that. But yeah, call me Gaio. My office is S2302, which is like right down at the end of the hall here. My office hours are actually in the Tutoring Center, but so the only time you would probably come to my office is like, if we make an appointment outside of office hours to meet and talk about something, which I'm always happy to do, by the way. If the office hours that are listed don't work for you, send me an email when you want to talk, and I can easily set up a time to meet. When I teach physics, I sort of like apologize to people because I'm not really a physicist. That's not what I studied. But when I teach statics and dynamics and deform, this is what I do. Everything I say, like, sure, in physics, like maybe like a third of the things I'm kind of making up as I go. But this stuff, this is the real stuff. the easiest way to get a hold of me is email, but there's a phone number. I won't pick up the phone because I don't even have a phone in my office, but I will get a message. I will get an email with a link to the message that you leave, and I can listen and call back or whatever, but email's the quickest. And the office hours are a little hard to remember this semester because they're sort of all over the place, but it's Monday 2 to 3, Tuesday and Thursday 1 to 2, and then Wednesday 2 to 4. And I do them all in the Tutoring Center. This week, I haven't been going to the Tutoring Center because I haven't talked about anything in class yet. So if you want to talk to me during office hours this week, I guess just come to my office. But starting next week, I'll be in the Tutoring Center. The prerequisites, these are the prerequisites for this class at the U, and that's why we have them. Let's see. Well, you really could get by without Calc 2, although if you're taking statics before you take Calc 2, you're sort of throwing off kilter the whole way that these classes are supposed to fit together. But if you haven't taken Calc 2 or you're taking it right now, that would work out. We can make that work, no problem. Differential equations, there's no need for that at all. I can't. Yeah, I think in this class, there's not a single thing related to that. There's one thing. Okay, there's one thing, but you don't need differential equations. I'll tell you everything you need. So don't worry about that. So if anybody doesn't have the prerequisites and you need me to sign a card saying that's okay, I'd be happy to do that. Okay, there are two noticeably unusual things that I do in my classes, and the first one is that there's no textbook. Everything that you have to do in this class you can do based on just what I say in lecture. The lectures and the problems are sort of developed together to reinforce each other. And really, I think, a lot of times when people get behind or can't figure something out, their first instinct in my classes is like, oh, well, I'll just get a textbook. I don't use a textbook because I talk about a lot of this stuff mathematically in a sort of a different way. And so I don't think that there's ever a time in this class where you would benefit, where like you would do better in this class by getting an outside resource. I really think the way to go is just you need to come talk to me or talk to classmates or both and just figure out what I was talking about. Because I'm, the way these lectures are set up, I'm just trying to think of the clearest, most concise way I can to get you to the point where you can do those problems, basically. And, books obviously are not, they have their own plan or whatever. But so stick with my plan. Yeah. The textbook that they use at the U is that Beer Johnson. It's sort of funny to have a college textbook called Beer. I think it's funny because it's like, like most, like at the U they have a bar called the library, so that like the frat guys or whatever can be like, "What's up, Mom? I'm at the library," and they'll be like, "Oh, my son's so studious." But this, like with the engineers, it's like the opposite. Like this is like this nerdy kid, and to his mom, he's like, "Yeah, I'm really consuming a lot of beer." And she's like, "Oh, my boy's made some friends or whatever." But so if you're going to transfer the U, that might eventually be a good reference for the future. And you can get any addition, so you can save a ton of money. But really, what I would recommend is just skip the textbook and just get the Shams outline. I would recommend getting those for every engineering and science class that you take. They offer, there's a million of them. Like every class you take, there's a Shams outline available, and they're paperback. They cost like $15 or $20. Maybe it's 25 now, or I don't know, but they're super cheap as books go. And every topic has a very concise little description, it's meant for people who've taken the class. So it's sort of more of a refresher than explaining the topic to you. And then a ton of problems with answers and solutions and stuff. So it's just a really nice thing to have around to remind yourself about a topic. Okay, so no required textbook. Everything's based on the notes. The only things that are required are a graphing calculator, and it doesn't have to be Texas Instruments, and it doesn't have to do eigenvalues and eigenvectors. But if you're looking for a new one, and you can find one that's not horribly more expensive than the others, having the ability to do eigenvalues and eigenvectors, you'll find useful in the next couple of years, pretty steadily over the next couple of years. And you also need a 3-ring binder with, and this says it's going to have 3 different sections. It actually has 4 sections as listed below. So you should get that soon. And probably, so it's going to hold all your class notes and all your homework and all your tests and stuff. So you probably don't want this one, you probably want at least this one, so at least 2 inches. Yeah, does it say the size on that? Is that 1.5 inches? That would be okay. Smaller than that will get tight, And it's a pain to have it all crammed in there, because then you have to open it so it's better to go too big than too little. And okay, I'll talk more about the setup of the binder when we get below. Course objectives, let's skip that. And let's kind of skip the topics for now. I'll go through sort of an outline of the stuff that we're going to talk about and what it means later on. The grading scale is 92, 82, 70, 60. And a lot of people want to know why the 92 and the 82. And really that's just because the way I design my tests and the way I grade my tests, that's ended up being a pretty good fair grade distribution in the past. So that's what I go with. If you look at that and you're worried it's going to be really hard to get an A, I don't think or really hard to get a B or whatever, I don't think you'll find that's the case. It really just reflects the fact that the questions I give on exams, the thought process is the same as the problems I give in assignments. So you never look at anything and have to really it really seems off the wall. You'll look at problems, and if you've done the work, you'll just be okay, I'm going to approach that the way I approached this one, and go through it. So I'm trying to make it so it's not horribly stressful, racing against the clock, trying to just write down anything you can think of on the page. I don't like that as an approach to engineering, because I would hate to think that the people who engineer the things that my life depends on are thinking that way as they're making it. You know what I mean? It seems like of all professions, maybe you'd want engineers to know what they know and know all of it, So that's sort of how I think of it. So the grade is broken down 70% exams, 15% evaluations of your binders, and those binder evaluations are what I do instead of collecting daily homework. So the idea is you do your problems that are assigned for the day, and you just put them in your binder. And then twice over the semester, I collect all the binders and look through and make sure you're doing all the problems and doing it with appropriate detail and that kind of stuff. Okay, and so the biggest part of your grade is the exams. And I'm going to just go through these 3 three parts of your grade, one by one. There are 5 total exams. They're all worth the same amount. So since they add up to 70%, there's 5 of them. Each one is worth 14% of your grade. And each exam is cumulative. So that means that through the whole semester, you're going to have to be working on new stuff, and you're going to have to be refreshing your memory on the old stuff. And the way I'm going to assign problems is going to help you do that. I'm like every day after about the first couple weeks. Every day I'll assign some problems that are on new topics and some problems on old topics, and some new reading and some old reading, just to make sure you keep it rattling around. And yeah. So the 5th exam is the final, and the time of the final is listed there. So it's the Thursday of finals week at 2 o'clock. Oh, and before I say this, it says no makeup exams. I'd like you to take almost all your exams in class. If it turns out that you have something important going on during one of the exams or whatever, I'm actually happy to give you a makeup exam. Just come talk to me beforehand and we'll set something up. But I don't want to be at the point where people are taking 2 or 3 or 4 exams separately from the class. So anyways, yeah, just come talk to me. We can most likely work something out if one of these dates is hard. But then at the end of the semester, after you take the final, if you do well on the final, and there's at least one of the first 4 exams where you didn't score as high as the final, your grade for the final will replace that lower score. If you do badly on the final and it's worse than all your other 4, then those all just count. Those are your 5 exam scores. But so the way it works is like, if you do well on the final, then it sort of counts. That score kind of gives you a mulligan on one that you might have messed up before that. And then your final counts as 28% of your grade, 2 tests. If you do badly on the final, it's your worst test, then your final counts as 14%, So, like if you, sometimes it'll happen that people just totally have the wrong, I'm going to try to avoid this, but have the wrong idea of what I'm looking for on the first exam. They come in, they weren't preparing for that stuff at all or whatever. The first exam goes really badly. You could get, even if you get 10% or something on the first exam, and once you get a 90 on exam 5, that 10% just totally goes away. It doesn't have any effect on your grade. And you get a 90 for exam 1 and the 90 for exam 5. Any questions about that?
Yeah, do you do like test reviews or
no, I don't. I don't. Because I mean, to me, the way I think of it is like, well, all those assignment problems are kind of roadmaps for what kind of questions are going to be on the exams. So I think of it sort of as that's what it is, And I guess kind of the same way with what I say in lectures, when you have a textbook out of a 400-page textbook, and over the course of the semester, you're being assigned 200 pages of reading, you don't have time to do that reading in a lot of detail, But when it's just based on 3 hours a week, less than that, 2.5 hours, 2 and 40? Yeah, 2 hours and 40 minutes of lecture a week. That's not very much text. That cuts it way, way down. And so the trade-off is that you have time to not just sit there and listen, but to read those notes and then go back later and read them again. And I think it's reasonable to expect that you'll have a pretty good memory of like you know how you can get to the point when you go over something a few times and you're like, oh yeah, I know where that is. It's at the top of one of these pages before the doodle of the frog that I drew or whatever. I think it's reasonable to expect that you'll go through the notes enough to sort of have that kind of. Any other questions about the test? Okay, the second part of the grade is the binders. So the binders are just where you're going to put everything, your class notes. And since there's no textbook for this class, the binder is important to me because this is really what you're going to go to for future reference for the most part when you're trying to remind yourself how you did problems. So your notes need to be complete and they need to be legible. And same with your homework. This is the only way that I see your homework. So that shouldn't look like notes that you write yourself. That should look like stuff that you're turning in. That should be legible. This kind of stuff is important because communication is an important part of engineering. And I think if you get in the habit of writing legibly and being thorough in your notes and thorough in your steps and problems, you'll be happy later. You know, it'll really pay off later. And partly it'll pay off in grades because if you know, like you're just going to little by little score higher on stuff that's easy to read, easy to follow, you know. So I really want to try to encourage that. So your binder is going to be broken up into 4 sections. It says 3 here. That's a typo. Got to change that. But the 4 sections are class notes, assignments and solutions, repeated problems and solutions, and exams. So the notes are, you know, just all the class notes, and you need to have class notes for every day. So if you miss a class, it's fine to print out my PDFs, but you need to have something in there for every day of class because this is your textbook for later. And then I said that the first unusual thing about this class is the fact that there's no textbook. The second one, this is the second one, and this is the one that I think makes people wonder, like think about mutiny kind of at first. You know, people do not like this idea, but I really think you'll like it once you get used to sort of seeing what it does for your understanding. And what this thing is when we do new topics, I'll assign problems based on what we're doing. But then I'm also going to always be assigning some problems that you've already done. They've already been assigned, okay? And you're going to put those in your binder in the repeated problems part. And I think to some people it feels like it's going to be a waste of time. You don't like that idea. I already did this, you know, like why am I doing this again? But I really think if you give it a fair chance, you'll see that repeating problems really solidifies what kind of problems we saw. It'll help you remember what the types of problems are, and it'll really enforce your memory of how to do these problems, you know. And honestly, when these problems aren't assigned, most of the people who get high A's in classes are doing that anyways, you know. So I think it's a good habit to get into in any class when you can find the time to do problems again. But I think you'll like it. I think you'll feel like, you might not like spending the extra time, but you have to be working on this stuff 7 hours a week anyways. So if you're not doing those repeated problems, what are you going to be doing? That's my question to you. And it says like, okay, so like I saw a rate my professor thing where this person was like it's so stupid. I got a C in this class and I shouldn't have. And like partly it's not fair because the binder is so stupid. To get the points for the binder, you have to redo all these problems, but you can just copy the problems. Like, yeah, that's why That's why you got a C, because you copied the problems. Like, that's not the idea here. The idea is to go back to these problems that you've done and try to do them without looking at your notes, figure out what you know about them, you know. Just stay with the program, you know, that's all I'm saying. Just stay on the program. Like, everything I say in the lecture and every problem that I write, it's like they're written and revised and whatever to try to hit certain things, you know. If you are spending your time trying to understand what I'm saying in lecture and how those things in lecture relate to the things that are happening in the problems, then the story is all going to fit together nicely, you know. Yes?
I'm having a hard time visualizing what the binders will look like. So are the assignment, the questions, the assignments, and the solution separate? Or the problem and then the solution of the problem?
You know, you can sort of do it somewhat, but I think what most people do is that from Thermo? Oh, yeah. So, there's the syllabus, there's all the class notes, and then what most people do, and I mean, I'm totally flexible on this, but most people put all of the, like, print out the problems and put them all in the front of the assignment section, you know, but this is perfectly good. And then you have all your work on the homework, you know. And then the next section is just the same thing again, just going through the problems. And I'll assign these day by day, you know, so like for today, for example, it'll say, read the notes from today, read the notes from this date, read the notes from this date, and then it'll say, do problems 2 through 11. Okay, is this still going? Yes. And you're going to turn your binders in twice, Thursday, February 6th, and Thursday, April 23rd. And each of those times, I'll definitely get it back within a week. I should be able to get it back the next, well, I guess I do it on Thursday so I can get it back on Tuesday. So you'll give it to me on a Thursday. I'll keep it over the weekend, give it back on Tuesday, and I've scheduled those if I did it right, so that I'll have them at a time when you don't have any quizzes or exams coming up right away, so you can spare a weekend without it. Those 2 times are each worth the same amount of the grade. So the first time you hand in your binders, that evaluation will be worth 7.5%. Second time, 15%. If you do everything and have notes for everything and do the problems thoroughly, you know, most people in the class will get perfect, you know, scores on the binders. The only way you don't really is if you're not addressing some of the problems, or, you know, not giving it a serious try, you know, that kind of thing. Any other questions about the binders? Okay. And then the last part of your grade is the quizzes. There's 7 total quizzes. Those are just like the last 10 minutes of class, once every 2 weeks. And the exams are all based on problems, so they're like the assigned problems. The quizzes are different. Those are just short answer questions about the important, what I consider the most important stuff that I say in class. So it's just to get ready for those, you just need to be reading and re-skimming the notes and that kind of stuff, just reminding yourself where topics are and stuff. and the lowest quiz score gets dropped. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. That's poor counting, but so they're yeah, right. So it's a total of 15% of your grade based on 5 quizzes. So each one is worth 3%. And then the last thing is, I don't expect this to be a problem, but if there's anyone in the class that's, you know, consistently being distracting, talking about things unrelated to class, interrupting with, you know, then I reserve the right to take some points off the grade, but that's not usually a problem. And don't cheat. Anybody have any questions about the syllabus or the layout of the class? Yeah.
I have two things. I have one question regarding the validity of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Statics and dynamics. Is there a dynamic point between the curriculum?
No, not really. The biggest thing that we'll learn in statics, the most important takeaway, I think, is just being able to do free body diagrams for all sorts of stuff that you've never thought about trying to represent the forces for before. You know, free body diagrams are the main thing, and so that ability to do free body diagrams of objects that are connected to other objects by joints and all that kind of stuff is useful in dynamics, but I also review it in dynamics, so it can help a little bit, but they're pretty separate.
Okay. The second thing is, as I was cursing at the beginning,
yeah.
you answered the joke, so
not funny.
Everybody that knows me know I don't carry myself as such. So,
yeah, thank you. I was just kidding too. I was just kidding about editing it out of the video, really, because that would take a lot of work. I'd have to find it and everything.
it was good. I was like, whoa.
Any other questions about the class or the syllabus? Okay, well, the only other thing I'm going to do today is I'm kind of going to give you the background of what we're going to talk about in statics, what it applies to, and I'm going to show where it fits into sort of a tree of all the different mechanics classes. Okay, so this is what all your time in mechanics will look like. And it's slightly different depending on what department you're planning to major in. In aerospace, there's a lot of similarities, but aerospace is a little different than civil engineering, is a little different than mechanical. But mechanics starts with physics 1. That's where you first start learning about forces and mass and free body diagrams and accelerations and stuff. And from physics 1, you normally go to statics. So that's us. And then from statics, there's kind of 2 directions that mechanics goes. On one side is the question of, will the object break? And, you know, other detailed questions about where is that fracture going to start? How is it going to start? You know, what'll the deformation be? That kind of thing. And in the other direction is the question of how will it move? Going from statics to figuring out where you're concerned about a fracture happening or damage happening. The next class you get to is deform. Almost every university calls this mechanics of materials, but the U calls it deform, and so that's why we call it deform. But yeah, mechanics of materials. And then from deform, the next class that people take normally, not always, but is just kind of, you can think of this as just like advanced deform. It's called continuum mechanics. And then after that, there's sort of two directions you can go. So from continuum mechanics, you can go in a mathy direction, and then that would be like more continuum mechanics, advanced continuum mechanics. The math gets very complicated, a lot of very complicated differential equations. Or you can go in the less mathematically complicated. This really is more of like an academic subject, something like academic researchers work on. But if you're planning to use this for a company or most research projects too, you go in the more practical direction from continuum mechanics. And that is finite element analysis, which is a computer method and it lets you do more complicated calculations than continuum mechanics does with much easier math, because it just breaks things up into tiny little pieces and then approximates those pieces using sort of simple ideas. So like if you're working, I said that, if you're working for a company or most research projects and you just have to figure out what the stresses and strains are in something the shape of something with a complicated shape, and you're applying some forces to it, you're going to use the computer approach. From statics, if you go in the direction of calculating the motion of things, the next class you get to is dynamics. And this is the class that some of you are taking with me right now. This is the class that we teach at Normandale. It talks a little bit about energy, but mainly this involves Newton's laws. And then there's two directions you can go from dynamics. One is intermediate dynamics, which is like a junior or senior level class. And this one is usually more of an energy approach than a Newton's laws approach. And in the other place you can go from there is fluid dynamics. So if you're in mechanical engineering, there's a good chance that you won't you'll stop after deform. You won't go through continuum mechanics. Maybe depending on what your specialty is, you might do finite element analysis. But then you do a lot of fluid dynamics. And whereas like if you're in civil engineering, depending on your specialty, you might do some fluid dynamics, but the motion of rigid bodies isn't usually very useful in civil engineering. You're trying to keep rigid bodies from moving. So you'd focus more on the will it break side. So now let me give a couple of the kinds of calculations that we're going to be able to do by the time we're done with this class. So here are a few engineering examples. Of statics applications. The first one is, this is supposed to be like a medical kind of clamp thing called a rongeur. Let me draw it and then you can sort of see how it all fits together. But it's like a compound kind of pliers thing. And when you push down, push these two parts together with a force F, and say that there's something in there, in medical applications like a bone is what it would be. That bone applies a force to that part of the pliers. Let's call that R. And say we want to know what the relationship is between that force F and that force R. This doesn't always have to be used for analyzing stuff with engineering materials. You could also have stuff like so this is supposed to be, someone lifting this weight. And someone doing like a squat. Can you picture what I'm trying to draw here? So you can also use it for, other applications like medical applications, orthopedic applications. The kind of thing that you'd want to know pretty often is like, what's the force? It's a tension force. Felt by the Achilles tendon in this position. Okay, so the Achilles tendon connects down here and connects about here, and it connects the bone of your heel to all of the muscles in your calf. Okay, and if you put too much tension in that tendon, you get ruptures. And so this is the kind of thing that orthopedic specialists would be doing it for, sports medicine type applications. And then in sort of civil engineering type applications, say that you have a bridge or part of a roof or something that's supported by a system of beams like this. And say that there's a, force applied here. What are the compression and tension forces? In the members. So you can see there's similarities in the setup of all these kind of problems. If you think of the weightlifter as just being a collection of bones that are connected by joints, all of these have rigid members that are connected to each other by joints, and you're applying forces to one spot, and you're trying to see what forces and does that mean end up being caused at on the other members. So they all have that in common, but there's a really wide range of the kinds of engineering problems that you can use this approach for. Anybody have any questions about that, applications or anything? And in my classes, I always give all the equations that you need, and I will here too, but for almost this whole class, there are really two equations that we're going to need. Okay, so remember from Physics 1, that the main Newtonian laws that we use for rigid bodies is first Newton's second law that says add up all the forces on an object, and that's equal to the mass of the object times the acceleration vector of the object's center of mass. And then the second equation, I call it rotational Newton's second law, says add up all the moments produced about the axis A, so MA net, that's equal to the mass moment of inertia about A times the angular acceleration of the body. And there's some limitations on what that point A can be, what you can treat as the axis of rotation. So A is either a fixed point in the body and the coordinate system, or the body's center of mass. Okay, so that's Newton's laws for a rigid body if you're allowing motion. In statics, everything's in equilibrium. So the acceleration of the center of mass is equal to 0, and the angular acceleration is equal to 0. And so Newton's second law just says the sum of all the forces on the body, F net, is equal to 0. And the rotational version of Newton's second law says add up all the moments applied to the body around that axis A, and that's equal to 0. And in this case, A can be anything, since every point on the body is fixed in the body and in the coordinate system. Okay, so this really is all we need to know about the physics for the first 3/4 or something of this class. What we're doing really is, the full laws include accelerations. So we're first, before we get to the complicated stuff where we have to deal with accelerations, we're just getting used to drawing free body diagrams, calculating those force vectors and stuff like that. The one thing that's sort of a bad habit that comes out of statics that I don't like is the difference in the way you treat the rotational Newton's second law, because in statics, we're gonna see we can choose anything as our about point, anywhere we want, okay? And we'll get the same answer. When you go to dynamics after that, you have to remember that not everything can be used as the about point if you have that angular acceleration. You can only choose your about point to be a fixed point, like where the body's connected to the ground by a joint, or the center of mass of the body. So try to keep that in mind. Okay, any questions? All right, see you Thursday. So if you have this object that's rotating around a hinge like that,
Yep.
and you apply a force to it like that,
Yep.
Then the moment produced is going to be this length times that force, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is the about point. Okay,
It is about.
right.
Okay, that's just what I needed to know.
Okay, got it. It's the hinge, yeah.
Kevin did some of the stuff that you used.
Yeah.
That's gonna be.
Yeah, physics people and engineering people tend to use sort of different notation.
Okay,
So
that's good to know.
about, yeah,
So
just
that's
think
the
about.
Okay.
Or axis works
Yeah, we
too.
used hinge. So, or what?
Axis.
Axis. Yep.
We're just curious of the furthest, like, you had that list of the statics versus
Yeah.
what's the furthest it goes down. Is this it, or?
So Normandale has statics and deform and dynamics.
Okay.
So the next level on in each of those directions we have.
All right, thank you.
Okay, sure. Hi.
Oh, where's your friend?
He can wait.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, do you know anything about this teacher or where her office is?
Oh, I haven't seen her in a long time. Oh, wait, do I?
I don't know, she might be a teacher or something.
Oh, sociology. No, I'm sorry, I don't know. I thought that was someone else.
Oh,
Okay.
The vectors.
The vectors, that's right. And I'll post some stuff though. No, sorry, I guess I can't help
Yeah,
you.
no, it's okay. I just trying to find your office hours. It doesn't have it on there.
No, it doesn't.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. All right, that's okay.
Sure, bye. Okay. Yeah.
It seemed like
Sure.
the way you format the organization is consistent between.
Yeah, just put a big divider in the middle to separate the two. Okay, that'll work fine, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, yep, bye. Hi.
I didn't email you yesterday,
Oh, okay.
so I
okay.
So like I have to apply for that company first.
Oh, okay.
Like they contact my university, like they have to send them files.
Yeah,
Like email, not even like.
right. Yeah, no email. Right. Okay. Okay. It can't hurt, and I mean, you'll see sort of a new way of looking at it. So yeah, yeah, it'll be good to refresh your memory. But that stuff is such a pain. But yeah, I think yeah. Okay, great. So I'll see you in both classes. Oh, all three. Okay.
Which is
Deform too.
yeah, deform. So like about the repeat problems. Like, are we expecting these to be more exams? Like repeat problems? You know, like a kind of like problems that we already done.
Yeah, right.
So are we expecting these to be more exams?
Not really. I mean, all of the questions that I assign are equally likely to be on the exam, but it's just a way to remember the problems better and remember how to do them better. Yeah.
And for the victors, like the all three classes, the same thing.
Yeah, just do it once.
Do it once.
It doesn't matter which class.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, see you tomorrow.